Hello, I'm David Marler, and this week we're going to be talking about some of the difficult vowels that you need to learn when learning how to speak with RP. We're going to be looking today at the vowel, the vowel or the schwa, the O glide, the noise, and the O noise. And we're going to start really quickly with a quick transcription. I want you to look at the following words here, and I want you to transcribe them using the information that we had from the previous slide. So pause the video really quickly and grab your vowel charts, and we're going to see if you can transcribe the words properly. I'm going to start by pronouncing the words and listen carefully, and then I want you to transcribe them. The first one is nurse. The second one is about. The third one is moat. The fourth one is mother. The fifth one is rotten. And the final one is organ. Now pause this slide and transcribe them really quickly. Here are the answers to the transcriptions from the previous slide. If you look at the following words, we can see that we're using the main vowels that we're going to be looking at this week, starting with nurse, and notice here how we don't use the R, about, beginning with the schwa, and then we have the ow noise. We then have moat, the same noise that we have, for instance, in go. Then we have mother, we have rotten, and as you can see here, I've accepted two transcriptions. Both would be okay on the final exam. And we have organ. Notice here how I've also used the small marker, the diacritic, that we use to denote where the stress is in the word. It's good to use this because it helps you know when we use the schwa and when we don't. Now the first vowel that we're going to be looking at is the nurse vowel. We spell the word, or we transcribe using kind of the same symbol that looks like a 3. And then we have the 2 dots, which lets us know, of course, that it's a long vowel. Now, when we have nurse, we're going to first look at the spellings that are common in English. So for instance, we have ER as in her, serve, heard, and colonel. And notice here that we don't ever transcribe the R. And more importantly, with the word her, which is a pronoun, we also will use a weaker form of that when we're talking in connected speech. We then have EAR as in earth and learn, earnest and heard. We have IR as in third, first, ger, and sir. And we have UR as in church, fur, turn, and curse. But we also have irregular spellings such as worse, journey, and colonel. And colonel is, of course, a very difficult one because it's a historic spelling. And when we say this word and when we make this noise, we have to make sure that our lips are spread. And essentially, it's the same noise that you make when you make the schwa noise, except for now it's long. So if you have a word like about, you have that first and now we're going to take that and we're going to make it very long. In Dutch, it's often confused with the noise, as in beurs, but we don't use that. And the big differences between the Dutch noise, beurs, and the English noise in, for instance, earth, is that in English, your lips are going to be spread, whereas in the Dutch noise, your lips are going to be rounded. So make sure that when you're practicing this noise, that it almost appears as if you're smiling while you speak. That makes sure that your lips aren't going to round unnecessarily. So let's practice this really quickly by repeating after me, and then afterwards I also want you to transcribe these sentences. Now the first one is first things first. So repeat it with me. First things first. The second one is I'm virtually certain. I'm virtually certain. The third one is learn the third verse. Learn the third verse. Then we have don't dirty the furniture. Don't dirty the furniture. And finally, we have Shirley's working in Birmingham. Shirley's working in Birmingham. Now what I want you to do is pause this slide and I want you to transcribe the sentences. Once you're finished, you can find the answers to these sentences on page 134 in Sounding Better. And these are sentences 601 to 605, 606. The next vowel that we're going to look at is one that we use most often when transcribing because of the nature of the vowel, and it's the schwa noise. Now, schwa comes from a Hebrew letter, and we use this to almost mean an empty noise. The reason why we use it a lot in English, and the reason why it's used in a lot of languages, is the fact that we use it when our mouth is completely relaxed. So our jaw is neither raised nor dropped, and our tongues are relaxed in the middle of our mouths. And if we just make a very relaxed noise, we get the noise, the same noise that we made in the previous noise, the nurse noise. But with the bonus vowel, we're never using it in stressed words. So almost all vowels plus R in English can be pronounced with an And it's similar to the Dutch one, except for once again, just like in Beurs, it's rounded, your lips are rounded in Dutch, and in English it's not. In English it's also slightly lower. So what we're going to do, of course, is we're going to have a practice assignment where I want you to underline the schwas. So the first sentence we have is, I've never bothered to tell her. So I've never bothered to tell her. The second one is, Anna's lost the other spanner. Anna's lost the other spanner. The next one is, we've discovered another under the cupboard. We've discovered another under the cupboard. Now take a moment to write these 3 sentences down, and I want you to underline the schwas. Make sure to pause the slide now. The answers will be on the next slide. So if we look at our first sentence, we're going to have, I've never bothered to tell her, and we're going to see that here you should have underlined 4 schwas. The first one in never, the second one in bothered, the third one in t, and the fourth one in her. Now when we were talking about the nurse vowel, I mentioned that her does take a nurse vowel, and this is the case if we stress the word her. However, in a sentence like this, in connected speech, we would actually use the weak form of the word. Remember, most pronouns and a lot of verbs that are, for instance, auxiliary verbs or helping verbs, and a lot of other grammar words in English will take a weak form, and you do have to know these forms for the test. The next sentence that we have is, Anna's lost the other spanner. Now in this sentence, you're going to notice that the Anna's has it, the word other, and the word spanner, and there isn't going to be an R in the last 2 words. But the word the before other, we don't underline. And the reason why we don't is because the word other starts with a vowel. So we say, Anna's lost the other spanner. The next sentence that we have is, we've discovered another under the cupboard. So we, and then discover, another, under the cupboard. Those would be the ones that we would underline. I want you right now to pause the slide, and I want you to transcribe these 3 sentences. Once you're finished, you can open up your Sounding Better book to page 135, and you can check your answers. They are sentences 620, 621, and 622. The next noise that we're going to look at is the O noise. And as we can see here, it's a glide or a diphthong. We know that it's a glide or a diphthong because it has 2 symbols written as one noise, meaning that we begin at the schwa noise and we end at the book noise. So let's look at how these spellings generally work. So the goat vowel, in most cases, we're going to see this be written as a single O, or as an O followed by a consonant followed by an E, such as go, a gold, home, joke, or roam. We then have OA, which is road and loaf. Then we have toe, dough, and goes. If we spell it with an OE, OU would be mold, though, poultry. And then we have OW, like no, flow, and so. And so here is different than the word sow, so meaning the verb to plant something. Now the goat vowel is actually quite easy for Dutch learners to learn because it's very similar to the O in Dutch as in zo. So if you, the slight difference is that English has a little bit of a larger glide, but the noise is very similar, so it's easy to learn. One thing that you do have to remember when dealing with the goat vowel is that we start with an open vowel and we end with the book vowel. And the book vowel, of course, is a vowel in English that requires us to round our lips. So if you look in at the symbol inside sounding better, you're going to notice that the symbol starts on the left-hand corner with a box and ends rounded. That means that in this glide, we start with our lips completely open, and when we end, our lips are closed and rounded. So we say go. This is also very different from the American vowel, which is actually, instead of a schwa, is spelled with the letter O, because go is very different from the British go. And the go is a little bit of a longer glide. We're going to try transcribing three sentences, to see if you understand where these noises would belong. So the first one is no old jokes. The second one is I told you so. And the third one is it's only rolled gold. So I want you to pause the slide right now, transcribe these three sentences, and on the next slide you'll see the answers. As you can see here, we've used the O noise quite a bit. So we have no old jokes, then we have I told you so, and it's only rolled gold, which in itself is quite difficult to pronounce. The next vowel that we're going to be looking at is going to be the most difficult for all of you to learn, especially if you're a native Dutch speaker. The reason is that the strut noise, or the upside down umbrella, and personally I like using the word umbrella because the in umbrella is also a strut vowel, but the spelling is difficult, and on top of that it's really far away from any Dutch verb. So what I want you to do really quickly is open up your books to page 61, and you're going to see on page 61 in Sounding Better a list of what we call the worry words. And the worry words are going to be difficult words for you to learn because they are spelt with an O, which would make us think that it's a lot vowel or a thought vowel, but in reality it's a strut vowel. And these are words that are used quite often in English, like done, non, month, mother, brother, other, love, etc. And yet they're all pronounced with a letter that's generally associated with the U, as in bus. So if you figure out that the word done and bus are actually using the same noise, it becomes quite difficult for students, for learners of English, to understand this. So the most common spelling is with the U or the OU, as in sun, cut, and dull. But then we also have the OU and the OUGH, and a big one is country. For some reason, there are a lot of people in the Netherlands that find country a very difficult word to say, probably because of the word count, which uses a completely different vowel. And we also have words like enough, tough, and rough. So the strut vowel is spelt in a variety of ways with different letters, and we really have to focus on the noise. But the noise can also be very tricky for Dutch speakers. The reason being is that we have three vowels in Dutch that are generally used with the U and the O. The first one is nut, as in the noise, which is spelled or transcribed with a small uppercase Y. We then have zot and lot, which is transcribed with almost the same vowel that we have with the thought vowel. And then we had zat, af, and bat, and that one is transcribed with a small letter A, which we don't use in RP. Now, when we're speaking in English with the strut vowel, a majority of the Dutch speakers, especially new learners, a lot of your students, they're going to confuse it with the nut, hut, and dun vowel, which means that when they pronounce it in English, instead of getting a word bus, which is a centered and lowered noise, we then get words like bus, which if you can feel at your jaw, it's much more tense when you say the word bus in Dutch than if you say the word bus in English, where you drop your jaw. A lot of the students, after they've studied English for quite a bit, the noise starts changing and it starts sounding a little bit more like zot and lot. So you'll say like bus. And this noise is getting closer, but it's still way too far front and it needs to be pulled back towards the middle. And so for this, you really just have to practice speaking it and repeating the words over and over again. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look first at the following sentences, and I'd like you to repeat after me. So we have tough luck. Tough luck. I'd love to get drunk. I'd love to get drunk. It's nothing much. It's nothing much. Run up to the front. Run up to the front. And finally, jump on the bus. Jump on the bus. Now what I'd like you to do really quickly is pause this slide and I'd like you to transcribe these 5 sentences. Once you're finished, you can find the answers on page 135 in Sounding Better, and they are sentences 640 through 644. Now our next vowel that we use is going to be the lot vowel, and the lot vowel and the strut vowel are going to be the ones that get confused the most, and there's a few reasons why this happens. Now with the lot vowel, the spelling is often, much like the strut vowel with our worry words, is spelled with an O, like as in dog, pot, and body. We also have the A, WA, and QUA, like was, want, and quality. The O followed by a consonant followed by a E, like gone. And once again, the OUGH, which we also see with the strut vowel, where we have words like cough. The OW as in knowledge, the AW as in because. And when we look at the lot vowel, we see that there are a few different pronunciations. So the Dutch zot, which is spelt phonetically, as you can see, is very similar to it, but it's too close, too tense, and it's drawn back on the tongue. So what it's closer to the word zot. So American English does not use the lot vowel, and this makes it also quite difficult for new learners, especially if they're exposed to a lot of English on television. So a lot of Dutch speakers find it a little bit easier to use the American pronunciation because the American pronunciation of the lot vowel is closer to the Dutch as if you were to say zot. So for instance, if you have some British words and you use the lot vowel, they're going to be a little bit farther back and they're going to be less tense. So let's look at a few examples and I want you to transcribe them for me. So our first is going to be what, hover, dozen, month, and wasp. So once again, I want you to listen very carefully and I want you to see whether it's a lot or a strut vowel. So what, hover, dozen, month, wasp. Now I want you to pause this slide and on the next slide you're going to see the answers. So here are the answers to the previous questions. If we look at the word what and hover, you're going to see that my jaw drops slightly more than with dozen and month, and wasp does the same thing. So the lot vowel, once again, is going to be our farthest vowel. It's a vowel pronounced at the very bottom of our mouths, whereas dozen and month are going to be more towards the center. Now the final vowel we're going to be looking at is the thought vowel. And this once again has a myriad of spellings that you can see here. And when we pronounce the thought vowel, it's going to be a long vowel in British, which is also a difference for people that have learned other dialects of English where it's often pronounced as a shorter vowel. So we have port, law, fought, daughter, mole, floor, horse, for, hall. So all of these words right here are going to be pronounced with a very long vowel, and as you can see, there are various spellings that we can use. So the thought vowel is easy for Dutch speakers to pronounce because it's similar to Dutch noises. However, we don't ever add the R to the noise when we're speaking in RP. Speakers with North American accents do have to pay attention here, because in North American English, the thought vowel and the lot vowel are often pronounced with the same noise. So when speakers in the United States and Canada use the thought vowel and the lot vowel, as you can hear in the way that I say both noises using the same. And it's very similar to the Dutch noise zat. So thought, not, lot, those are all going to be pronounced for North American speakers in the same way. So if you speak with a North American accent, it is good to have a look at the words and to really try to understand the differences between the long thought and the shorter lot. So if we practice these sentences, we're going to have the following four, and I want you to focus on the red letters. So we have 44, a tall order, the ball's in your court, Paul's daughter is a fourth former. So repeat those sentences, and I also want you to write them down and transcribe them. Once you're finished, you can find the answers on page 136, and they are sentences 687 to 690. That is it for this lesson. I hope that that it helps you better understand some of the tricky vowels in English. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me or your instructor.